提示
Important announcement.
Message important.
Важное объявление.
Anuncio importante.
يرجى من المتحدثين الكرام
传递发言信息，请代表发言时语速不要过快。
Speakers are kindly reminded to deliver their statements at a reasonable pace.
Что для того, чтобы устный перевод был полным и качественным, необходимо выступать в умеренном темпе.
Se ruega a los oradores que pronuncien sus declaraciones a un ritmo razonable para garantizar una interpretación íntegra y
Muy buenas tardes a todas y a todos.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, distinguished participants. I hereby declare open the 24th meeting of the 62nd session of the Human Rights Council. We'll now proceed with the consideration of the outcome of be provided by Nauru will constitute the outcome of the review and shall be adopted by the Council through a standardized decision. And I now have the pleasure to give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Frederick William Pitcher, Ambassador Extraordinary in
My honor to address you today on behalf of the government and people of the world's smallest republic, the Republic of Nauru. During this fourth cycle, Nauru received a total of 176 recommendations from member states. I am pleased to report that Nauru has accepted 100 Among the recommendations accepted and already achieved, I wish to highlight the following key areas. First, ratification of core human rights treaties, where Nauru has ratified or acceded to several core human rights instruments, including CEDAW. We remain committed to the domestication of these treaties. With international standards, Nauru has raised the minimum age for employment to 18 years, as provided for in our Public Service Act and Education Act. Domestic violence legislation. We have enacted comprehensive domestic violence legislation, strengthening protections for women and children and providing victim support services. Establishment of a national human rights institution. The Human Rights Commission Act of 2025 recently passed, legally establishing our UNHRC. Implementation is underway to ensure its operational effectiveness. And finally, we're at the creation of Ombudsman Office. Our leadership code provides for the establishment of an ombudsman. While implementation is ongoing, this marks a significant step towards greater accountability and good governance. Nauru's accepted recommendations span a wide range of human rights priorities, including ratification and domestication of treaties. We have accepted 20 recommendations in this area, demonstrating our commitment to international norms. 6 recommendations were accepted with regards to the abolition of the death penalty. Nauru officially abolished the death penalty through the Crimes Act 2016, replacing it with life imprisonment for murder. Nauru accepts all recommendations to enhance our cooperation with the UN human rights mechanisms and to build robust national frameworks. Nauru is committed to ensuring equality and non-discrimination across all public policies, with particular attention to vulnerable groups such as women, children, and persons with disabilities. Nauru continues to provide essential services and strengthen social protection also underway to enhance digital inclusion, cyber security, and data protection. As an island nation, food and water security are national priorities. Services through public-private partnerships and is focused on increasing school retention rates and inclusive education. Recognizing the existential threat of climate change, Nauru to protect women and children from violence. The marriageable age has been raised to 18 for both genders, and child protection services have been strengthened. Finally, Mr. President, 17 recommendations were noted. These recommendations touch upon deeply held cultural, social, and legal values in Nauru. While we respect the perspectives of recommending states, our approach is guided by national consultations, prevailing social norms, However, as a small island developing state, the very smallest in fact, we face significant challenges, including limited resources, geographic isolation, and the disproportionate impacts of climate change. Technical and financial support from the international community
Thank you very much for this presentation, Your Excellency. I now open the floor for member and observer states for their comments on the outcome of the review. The speaking time has been set.
Distinguished delegation from Nauru to the adoption of the UPR report and compliments Nauru's commitment to the UPR process. The Maldives commends Nauru for accepting the majority of the recommendations it received during the UPR working group session in January 2020.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Morocco.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. My delegation wishes to welcome the delegation of Nauru on the occasion of the adoption of its UPR report on education infrastructure and to strengthen the protection of vulnerable groups. The acceptance of a wide range of recommendations demonstrates a clear path towards progress. Morocco, valued by its strong ties of solidarity with small island developing states, reaffirms the
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Nepal.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Nepal welcomes the delegation of Nauru to the adoption of the UPR outcome and thanks them for their constructive engagements with the human rights mechanisms. We thank Nauru for accepting all 3 recommendations that we offered, which include establishing an independent national human rights institution, scaling up vulnerable communities. We take note of the progress made by Nauru in the areas of right of persons with disabilities and climate adaptation. Nepal wishes Nauru all success in implementing the accepted recommendations and support
outcome. We commend Nauru's commitment to strengthening its social protection systems through the National Social Protection Strategy, including enhancements to social welfare payments and programs. We also welcome progress and looks forward to continuing to work in partnership with Nauru on human rights issues. Thank you, Vice President.
Gracias, Senador.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Philippines.
Received. This is a strong demonstration of its commitment to human rights. We commend Nauru for accepting all 3 recommendations made by the Philippines on action and preparedness, ensuring that national planning and early warning systems address the specific needs of women and girls, older persons, and persons with disabilities. The Philippines is pleased to support the adoption of the outcome of Nauru's review and wishes
President, the Russian Federation notes with satisfaction the 4th UPR cycle of the review of Nauru. We thank Nauru for the written replies to the recommendations that way, and we'd like to point out that mechanism, we highlight the decisions of Nauru to solve the most important tasks related to human rights, for example, food security, especially in conditions of high dependence on food imports and adaptation to the distinguished representative of Samoa.
Thank you, Mr. President. We extend our appreciation to the delegation of Nauru for supporting all of Samoa's recommendations, namely access to quality education, with disabilities. We commend Nauru for the progress made in implementing recommendations from the previous UPR cycle, particularly its legislative reforms to give effect to its obligation of 159 UPR recommendations during this review, including those relating to the establishment of an UNHRC UNHRC, which we note has been partially achieved, and impacts of phosphate mining and constraints in human, financial, and institutional capacity, and wish to underscore the importance of continued international aid in this regard. Samoa recommends the adoption of the report by consensus and wishes the government success in the implementation
Gracias.
Welcomes the distinguished delegation of Nauru to the adoption of the first cycle of Universal Periodic Review Report. We commend Nauru for its continued commitment to the UPR process and other human rights mechanisms, clearly demonstrated by its acceptance of 159, including all 3 recommendations from Sierra Leone out of 176 recommendations received from other states during its review. Sierra Leone fully supports the adoption of the report and expresses
Mr. Vice President, Singapore congratulates the delegation of the Republic of Nauru on its 4th Universal Periodic Review. We commend Nauru for its engagement with the UPR process and its consideration of the various recommendations put forth by delegations. We thank Nauru for accepting both of our recommendations. First, to continue to strengthen its policies to provide access to healthcare for its people. Second, to continue to strengthen its policies combating violence against women and children.
Representative of UN Women.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. UN Women commends the government of Nauru for its continued commitment to advancing gender equality through cyber-centered services, coordinated responses, and improved data systems will be important to further strengthen prevention and protection efforts. UN Women also welcomes initiatives to promote women's economic empowerment. Further action to expand workplace protection and support women's political engagement and representation. Finally, as Nauru responds to the impacts of climate change and disasters, ensuring women's meaningful participation in climate and disaster risk governance will
Thank you. Now we'll listen to a video statement by the UNFPA.
The United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, welcomes the Republic of Nauru's and evidence-based policymaking. The development of the youth monograph provided important data on the situation of young people and informed the development of the national youth policy. UNFPA also communities, together with dialogues with faith-based leaders and youth engagement initiatives, strengthens national efforts to prevent and respond to violence and improve the health and well-being of all. to building a more inclusive, equitable, and resilient future. UNFPA looks forward to continuing its partnership with the government of Nauru to ensure no one is left behind.
Would like to welcome delegation of Nauru and thank the delegation for the presentation and the cooperation that it extends to the UPR, the achievements in the access to reproductive health services. We recommend Nauru to continue to strengthen its policies through the
Thank you, Mr. President. Vanuatu extends a very warm welcome and congratulations to the delegation of Nauru to the adoption of its We commend the Sustainable and Resilient Urban Development Project to significantly enhance access to safe drinking water and sanitation services. Vanuatu commends Nauru for accepting the significant majority of the recommendations
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Vietnam.
Mr. Vice President, Vietnam commends the constructive engagement of Nauru in its fourth EPR review cycle. We acknowledge with appreciation Nauru's acceptance of two recommendations made by Vietnam. Health services for including maternal, adolescent, and mental health, with particular attention to persons in vulnerable situations. We further appreciate the country's social UPR outcome report of Nauru by consensus and wish its success in its implementation. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative.
During its review, we view this acceptance as positive step towards reflection. We view this acceptance as a positive step that reflects Nauru's commitment to advancing human rights.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of China.
Mr. Vice President, the Chinese delegation recognizes Nauru's progress in protecting to enhance economic empowerment, promote healthcare, improve infrastructure, protect the rights of women, children, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable China supports adopting the outcome of the review of Nauru in the Council. Thank you.
Gracias.
Strengthen food security and improve access and sustainability of food resources for its populations. We also highlight the progress achieved in the area of gender-based violences, situations and families, and situations of economic the vast majority of recommendations that were made, including the constructive recommendations made by Cuba. Would like to wish Nauru full success in the implementation of accepted recommendations, and we support the adoption of the report. Thank you. Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Cyprus.
Thank you, Vice President. We warmly welcome the delegation of Nauru and thank them for their presentation. We commend Nauru for accepting a very large number of recommendations received during its fourth cycle, demonstrating their commitment to advancing in the promotion and protection of human rights despite numerous difficulties faced by the country arising from climate change and the further protection of inclusive education for women and girls with disabilities, as well as the full implementation of domestic violence laws, have been accepted. We support the adoption of Nauru
to the adoption of its UPR outcome and commends Nauru for its constructive engagement throughout the UPR process. We take positive note that Nauru has pledged support for the majority of recommendations received, including 2 confronted with multifaceted challenges that threaten development gains and the enjoyment of human rights. We acknowledge and laud Nauru's continued commitment and ongoing efforts to advance the promotion and protection of human rights in face of these adversities. Dominica therefore supports
And now we'll listen to other stakeholders, and I'd like to remind them that all of the statements, including those that were first is a video statement by Christian Council International.
I deliver this statement on behalf of Christian Council International. We commend the government of the Republic of Nauru for its continued engagement with the UPR process and for considering the recommendations of the fourth UPR cycle in accordance with its national values. In particular, we commend Nauru for maintaining the legal protection of the unborn child and reaffirming its sovereign right to determine its laws relating to abortion. There is no internationally recognized right to abortion, and the ICPD Program of Action recognizes that decisions concerning abortion fall within the sovereign competence of states. CCI also welcomes identity as separate grounds of discrimination or to legalize same-sex marriage. Relating to the accepted recommendations on expanding access to sexual and reproductive health services, including abortion. Likewise, CSE is not defined in any legally binding international instrument, and states retain the prerogative to adopt values-based educational approaches, including abstinence
human beings. Senor Vice Presidente, to living populations of Nauru, to delegation, to authorities of Nauru, including the highest, everyone everywhere, greetings of lively human rights, good afternoon. We are talking about a flourishing life, planetary life, fruitful and equal, peaceful life for all in all circumstances, life upheld and cherished, preserved without discrimination. We are talking about goodwill and persistency towards the good life for all. When we talk about life on a large scale, the numbers of people or social groups in danger, we are talking about the prevention of genocide and the universal ratification of the Genocide Convention. Ratification is rather simple, and so far it has no reporting obligations attached to it. Nauru, please ratify the Genocide Convention. Respect for life is also the greatest possible and not the least, to finalize the abolition of the death penalty. The Constitution of Nauru could also express the right to peace, establish a national human rights institution or a regional human rights institution, and protect all Naurans.
Give the floor to the World Jewish Congress.
And the World Jewish Congress welcomes the progress reflected in the report, including the passing of the Human Rights Commission Act last year, the adoption of the Inclusion of Persons with Disabilities Act, and the National Social Protection Strategy. We also note Nauru's continued efforts to strengthening gender equality. We also thank Nauru for its support of the exhibition Sports Creates Power, presented last September here at the UN, which told the story of Jewish athletes and clubs persecuted during the Holocaust. Building on this commitment to advancing human rights, we encourage Nauru to consider joining the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, working definitions of anti-Semitism and of Holocaust denial and distortion as a further tool against discrimination and anti-Semitism, with the aim to build a more open and resilient society. We wish the government of Nauru continued success in its efforts to promote and protect human rights. Thank you.
Gracias. A continuación vamos a escuchar.
Thank you. We'll now have a video statement from Just Atonement.
Thank you, distinguished President and members of the Council. Just Atonement Inc. commends Nauru for the crucial work it has done thus far to address the adverse effects of climate change and promote human rights. We first encourage Nauru to establish a national human rights institution that incorporates reviewing environmental issues as part of its mandate. Specifically, Nauru's UNHRC should aim to actively protect the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment as affirmed by international law and the recent advisory opinion from the ICJ. Second, we commend Nauru's Higher Ground initiative and encourage it to continue prioritizing economic diversification and investment by developing sustainable agriculture, renewable energy, and green housing. We encourage Nauru to obtain the grant-based climate finance to which it is entitled by international law and the UNFCCC, and to deploy such financing in a way that is consistent with sustainable development. Third, we strongly urge Nauru to promote land restoration projects, which will be crucial to addressing food security and water sanitation concerns. We've praised the great strides made by the Department of Environmental Management and Agriculture and strongly support the National Climate Smart Agriculture Plan and the Sustainable and Resilient Urban Development Project. In light of the aforementioned objectives, we encourage Nauru to take great care to move forward in compliance with international law and to adhere to its duty to prevent significant harm to the environment in an effort to protect the rights of future generations. We urge Nauru to review the June 26, 2026 statement from a group of UN experts calling for a precautionary pause to commercial deep seabed mining in light of the scientific evidence of irreparable harm to marine biodiversity likely to arise from this activity. We thank Nauru for its commitment to meeting its international human rights obligations and addressing the adverse impacts of climate change.
A continuación vamos a escuchar.
We will now listen to the last video statement from Imam Ali's Popular Students Relief Society.
Nauru accepted over 90% of their recommendations. In 2013, he urged Nauru to ratify these treaties. Although Nauru ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2012 and accepted all recommendations concerning asylum seekers, recent cases raise serious concerns about its implementation of these commitments. On May 27, reportedly sewed his lips together and commenced a hunger strike on May 29 in protest against his deportation and condition in Nauru. He was transferred despite freedom of opinion and expression and permit independent private media. These recommendations remain essential, particularly in light of continuing concerns that all media outlets are government-owned and subject to editorial control. We therefore urge Nauru to ratify the outstanding human rights treaties, fully implement the recommendations it has accepted, ensure the rights of asylum seekers, and take concrete steps
during this segment. Before I give the floor to the delegation of Nauru to make their concluding comments, I wish to say that of the 170
I'll try and be brief, but I first want to start off by thanking the last speaker and the speaker from UNFPA, Population Fund. One name up until colonization. Nauru, the name was given to us by Europeans. Our country's name has recently been changed a few months ago through our parliament and referendum. Our official name Mr. Vice President, the Republic of Nauru reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the UPR process and to the promotion and protection of human rights for all. This review, we are particularly appreciative of the support, understanding, and encouragement shown towards our unique circumstances as a small island developing state. Invaluable as we continue strengthening our national human rights framework and implementing the recommendations we have accepted. Nauru remains committed to working collaboratively of the government and people of Nauru. I once again thank all delegations for their constructive support and continued partnership. We look forward to maintaining this positive engagement as we strive towards a more
for his statement and the constructive participation of Nauru throughout the UPR process. I would now propose that the Council adopt the decision on the outcome of the Universal Periodic
Nadie formula ningún.
If there are no objections, I will take it that the decision
Muchas gracias por su paciencia.
voice if you're having a private conversation.
Como decía,
As I was saying, we will now consider the outcome of Rwanda. The outcome is based on the report of the working group. The floor to Her Excellency Ms. Urujeni Bakuramutsa, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary and Permanent Representative of Rwanda, to present additional information on the review.
Recommendations received during our fourth cycle of the Universal Periodic Review. At the outset, allow me to express Rwanda's appreciation to the Working Group on the UPR continued increase in the participation of member states and stakeholders in Rwanda's successive cycles, which reflect the value attached to the cooperation and the mechanisms that contribute to a rich and more constructive dialogue. Recommendations were received during the interactive dialogue. After careful review and a broad cross-institutional consultation coordinated by the Ministry of Justice through the National The outcome of Rwanda's fourth cycle UPR was considered by an inclusive and participatory national consultation process. Rwanda's position on the recommendation meant to implement a significant set of measures across diverse human rights areas. We recall that the UPR is a cooperative peer review mechanisms grounded in universality, mutual respect, and constructive dialogue. Is to accept recommendations that are consistent with our laws, our policies and capacities, and to take note of recommendations that require further domestication, consideration, distinct ethnic categories, whereas our constitutional framework deliberately promotes national unity and equal citizenship, as well as recommendations concerning matters for which effective responses already exist within our national institutions. Since our the last review, Rwanda has advanced a set of reforms the rights of women and girls, including gender-based violence and non-discrimination, and we remain committed to aligning domestic laws with the treaty obligations. Regarding and promote inclusive development. The government remains committed to poverty reduction and achieving the sustainable development, including ensuring strong representation in public and private sector institutions and strengthening legal protections against gender-based violence. On child rights, Rwanda has reinforced child protection systems, including strengthening birth registration, measures against exploitation and child labor, as well as access to education for vulnerable children. As reflected in the report of the Working Group, Rwanda has strengthened constitutional guarantees in the areas of civil and political rights, governance and justice, as with improved accountability and the effectiveness of justice institutions while safeguarding social cohesion and stability. On human rights institutions, facilitated civil society contribution and strengthened the national human rights architecture. We will continue to create enabling environments for civil society to operate mutually reinforcing. We continue to uphold the rule of law and to protect the rights of all citizens while maintaining national security and public order, ensuring that education and community engagement remain central to Rwanda's approach to human rights promotion. We combine classroom education with community-based dialogue to build a shared culture of rights and continue to strengthen the National Commission for Human Rights following the interactive dialogue. A new law governing the Commission, promulgated on 11th of June 2026, has expanded its mandate, strengthened legal protections for its staff, and updated its governance framework, thereby was recently reaccredited with A status in recognition of its continued compliance with the Paris Principles. Mr. Vice President, Rwanda remains committed to its international human rights obligations and universality, non-selectivity, and a constructive dialogue, always putting cooperation first. Rwanda believes that the Universal Periodic Review is the most effective when we foster genuine dialogue, mutual respect, and cooperation, while recognizing the diversity of national context and the different paths through which states fulfill their human rights obligations. Rwanda remains committed to ensuring accountability for the implementation of other relevant human rights mechanisms to share our progress made and the challenges incurred. In closing, Rwanda reviews the outcome of this review as a mirror reflecting the progress achieved and a roadmap guiding our continued efforts to strengthen promotion and the protection of human rights. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. In accordance with paragraph 13 of the annex of Council Resolution 16/21, I now give the floor to the National Commission for Human Rights of Rwanda, who will be making a video statement.
Members of the Human Rights Council and esteemed delegates, the National Commission for Human Rights of Rwanda welcomes this opportunity to address this 62nd session, during which the adoption of the Universal Periodic Outcome for Rwanda will be considered. The Commission notes with appreciation the government of Rwanda's continued effort to strengthen the promotion and the protection of human rights. We particularly welcome increased number of supported recommendations, including the ones calling to strengthen the capacity of the Commission. The Commission welcomes the commitment of the government of Rwanda to support its operational capacities and to expand its regional offices to improve accessibility for people across the country. In its capacity as a national preventive mechanism, the Commission commends the constructive cooperation that has facilitated regular and announced visits to visit some places of detention. These efforts have contributed to improvement in detention conditions, including reduction in prison overcrowding from 124% to 110 over the last year. We further note important progress in advancing the rights of young people through establishment of youth-friendly spaces in health facilities nationwide, providing access to essential sexual reproductive health services. While recognizing these achievements, the Commission notes that prison overcrowding remains a challenge. Then we therefore encourage the accelerated implementation of alternative dispute resolution mechanisms and non-custodial measures. We also call for the timely adoption of implementation of the second phase of the National Human Rights Action Plan and timely compensation in public interest expropriation cases, including penalties interest for delays beyond the legally prescribed period. The National Commission for Human Rights remains committed to working with all stakeholders to support the implementation of UPR recommendations and advance the enjoyment of human rights for all people in Rwanda. Thank you, Mr. President.
Now I give the floor to member states and observer states so that they can comment on the outcome of the review. Speaking time has been set at 1 minute, 30 seconds for all states. And the first speaker on the list is the distinguished representative of Malawi. Malawi is not in the room, so we can give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Maldives.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Maldives warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation from Rwanda to the adoption of the UPR report and compliments Rwanda's commitment to the UPR process. The Maldives commends Rwanda for accepting the majority of the recommendations received during the UPR working group session in January 2026, including the 2 recommendations made by the Maldives. We wish the government of Rwanda success in implementing the accepted recommendations and request that the Council adopt the UPR outcome report for Rwanda by consensus. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Morocco.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. My delegation extends its warmest congratulations to the delegation of Rwanda on the occasion of the adoption of its UPR report. Morocco commends the leadership and determination of Rwanda in implementing ambitious reforms, notably in the areas of gender equality, women's empowerment, and the modernization of the judicial system. The inclusive approach adopted by Rwanda during this review reflects its commitment to human rights values. Within the framework of an active and solidary South-South cooperation, Morocco reiterates its commitment in pursuing fruitful exchanges with Rwanda and fully supports the adoption of this report. We wish Rwanda every success in the implementation process. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Nepal.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Nepal welcomes the delegation of Rwanda to the adoption of UPR outcome and thanks them for their constructive engagements with the human rights mechanism. We thank Rwanda for accepting all 3 recommendations that we offered in the areas such as the participation of women in political and public spheres, social protection in both the formal and informal sectors, and quality healthcare services, particularly for low-income families and rural children. We take note of the progress made by Rwanda in the access to decent work, health, education, social protection, and climate adaptation. Nepal wishes Rwanda all success in implementing the accepted recommendations and supports the adoption of UPR outcome report by consensus. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Nigeria.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Nigeria extends a very warm welcome to the delegation of the Brotherly Republic of Rwanda to the adoption of its fourth UPR outcome report. Nigeria commends Rwanda for its active and constructive engagement with the human rights mechanisms, including during its review. We welcome Rwanda's acceptance of 249 recommendations, including those proposed by Nigeria, namely to mobilize resources and seek necessary support to strengthen the capacity of the National Commission for Human Rights, continue integrating a family-centered approach into national health and development strategies, and scale up investment to improve social economic well-being and protect the rights of women, children, persons with disabilities, and older persons. In recognition of these positive developments, Nigeria recommends the adoption of the UPR outcome report of Rwanda by consensus and wishes the government every success in the implementation of accepted recommendations. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Oman.
Thank you, President. We wish to welcome the head of the delegation of Rwanda and acknowledge their cooperation with the human rights mechanisms and the steps taken to expand access to education, particularly with regards to increasing funding for this sector, as well as developing vocational and technical training. We took note of the Rwanda's UPR outcome, which was undertaken in a spirit of constructive dialogue, and express our appreciation for accepting our recommendations. In closing, we recommend the adoption of Rwanda's outcome. We wish them development and success in implementing the accepted recommendations. And thank you, President.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Philippines warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation of Rwanda to the adoption of its UPR. We commend Rwanda for accepting 249 of the 286 recommendations, a clear reflection of its openness to dialogue and its commitment to advancing human rights through this mechanism. The Philippines thanks Rwanda for accepting all three of our recommendations to expedite the establishment of its national mechanism for implementation, reporting, and follow-up, to integrate human rights education into school curricula covering women's and children's rights, gender equality, and the nexus between human rights and the environment, climate change, and new technologies. And third, to strengthen measures against gender-based and violence and domestic violence. Mr. Vice President, the Philippines supports the adoption of the outcome of Rwanda's Universal Periodic Review and wishes it every success in implementing the recommendations it has accepted. I thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to this representative of the Russian Federation. Mr. President, the Russian delegations with satisfaction takes note of the fourth UPR cycle of Rwanda. We thank the delegation of Rwanda for written information related to the recommendations that were made. We point out that most recommendations have been accepted, including those made by Russia. We note the stable situation in the area of the protection of human rights and also certain progress in the area of strengthening the national potential in the promotion and protection of human rights. We do hope that the recommendations accepted by Rwanda during this UPR will be duly implemented and will make it possible to overcome existing problems related to the human rights situation in the country. The Russian Federation recommends the Council to adopt the report of Rwanda. Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to give the floor to the distinguished representative of the session.
Parece que no es el caso, así que pasa.
It doesn't seem that they are in the room. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sierra Leone.
Mr. Vice President, Sierra Leone warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation of Rwanda to the adoption of their fourth cycle of the Universal Periodic Review report and commends Rwanda for its continued commitment to the UPR process and other human rights mechanisms. We sincerely applaud Rwanda for accepting most of the recommendations received from member states during its review, including 4 of 5 of our recommendations. We respectfully encourage Rwanda to reconsider her position on the recommendation by Sierra Leone it has noted. We fully support the adoption of the report and express our best wishes to Rwanda for the successful implementation of the accepted recommendations. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you. I give the floor to Distinguished Representative of Singapore.
Mr. Vice President, Singapore congratulates the delegation of the Republic of Rwanda on its 4th Universal Periodic Review. We commend Rwanda for its engagement with the UPR process and its consideration of the various recommendations put forward by delegations. We thank Rwanda for accepting all 3 of our recommendations. First, to enhance poverty eradication efforts, including through measures to expand access to food, safe drinking water, and adequate sanitation in rural areas. Second, to continue to expand access to quality education, including for children with disabilities. Third, to continue to sustain efforts to tackle chronic malnutrition among children. Singapore supports the adoption of the Working Group's report on Rwanda's UPR. Thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to Distinguished Representative of South Sudan.
Mr. Vice President, South Sudan welcomes the distinguished delegation of friendly Rwanda on the adoption of its UPR outcome and expresses its gratitude for its continued engagement in the UPR process. We commend Rwanda for taking a people-centered approach to ensuring economic, social, and cultural rights by focusing on the realization of an adequate standard of living, access to decent work, health, education, social protection, and the development of resilience to climate-related and other shocks. South Sudan further commends Rwanda for its continued focusing on strengthening constitutional guarantees and implementation of the national policy of unity and reconciliation. We thank and appreciate Rwanda for accepting a total of 249 recommendations out of 286, including 2 recommendations submitted by South Sudan. South Sudan extends its best wishes to Rwanda for the successful implementation of the accepted UPR recommendations and offer its steadfast support for the adoption of its UPR outcome. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to Distinguished Representative of Sudan.
Thank you, President. We acknowledge the developments with regards to protection of human rights and their promotion with regards to planning, development, and policy making. We welcome engagement with the UPR and presentation of the report, as well as acceptance of recommendations provided, including ours, which call for further efforts to reinforce institutional human rights institutions, implement the national unity and reconciliation policy. We recommend the adoption of the report, wishing Rwanda a successful implementation of the accepted recommendations. Thank you, President.
Thank you. I give the floor to the representative of UN Women.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. UN Women commends the government of Rwanda for its sustained leadership in advancing gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Rwanda continues to demonstrate notable progress, particularly as a leader in women's political participation, advances in gender-responsive laws, and enhancements in national systems to prevent and respond to gender-based violence. These achievements provide a strong foundation for the realization of human rights and inclusive, sustainable development. As the international community implements the Beijing +30 commitments and advances the 2030 agenda, sustained and strategic investment in gender equality remains essential to achieving transformative results across all sustainable development goals. Looking ahead, UN Women encourages continued efforts to expand women's economic opportunities, particularly in innovation, technology, and access to finance. Addressing structural barriers, including harmful social norms and unequal care responsibilities, remain critical. Continued action to eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls, alongside sustained investments in social cohesion, inclusion, and women's leadership will be essential to safeguard development gains. Strengthening resilience and leadership of women in climate action and sustainable development will be critical to ensure inclusive and resilient progress. UN Women remains committed to support the government of Rwanda in translating these priorities into tangible results for all women and girls. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the representative of the UNFPA. Video statement.
Mr. President, UNFPA Rwanda commends the
for its active engagement in this universal periodic review process. We welcome the state's transparent presentation and its continued commitment to advancing human rights, sexual and reproductive health, gender equality, and the empowerment of women and girls. We applaud the significant progress that has been achieved recently in Rwanda, including reductions in both maternal and under 5 mortality, as evidenced by the recently concluded Rwanda's demographic and health survey. UNHRC Rwanda stands ready to support the implementation of the recommendations from this review, specifically in strengthening SRHR services, expanding comprehensive and age-appropriate sexuality education, and ensuring universal access to quality sexual and reproductive health information and services. Addressing gender-based violence and technology-facilitated gender-based violence through enhancing public awareness on data and policy, providing technical assistance for data-driven policies that advance the ICPD program of action and the Sustainable Development Goals would also be very critical. We look forward to continuing our collaboration with the government in translating the recommendations of this review into tangible improvements for every woman, girl, and young person in Rwanda. Thank you very much.
The next speaker on my list is the distinguished representative of the United Republic of Tanzania.
Mr. Vice President, the United Republic of Tanzania warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation of the Republic of Rwanda and thank it for its constructive engagement throughout the fourth cycle of the UPR process. Tanzania commends Rwanda for its openness during the review and for accepting the recommendations aimed at strengthening promotion and protection of human rights. This demonstrates Rwanda's continued commitment to advancing human rights and fundamental freedoms. Tanzania encourages Rwanda to continue implementing the accepted recommendations in close cooperation with relevant stakeholders. The United Republic of Tanzania supports the adoption of UPR report outcome of the Republic of Rwanda and wishes the government every success in implementing the accepted recommendation. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. We would like to extend a warm welcome to the delegation of Rwanda and thank the delegation for the introduction. We highlight its cooperation with the UPR mechanism and the acceptance of 249 out of the 286 recommendations received. We appreciate the acceptance of the 3 recommendations made by Venezuela concerning the strengthening of mechanisms for citizen participation, the reduction of poverty through territorial strategies, the expansion of free and quality education, as well as the strengthening of health and social protection systems. We encourage Rwanda to continue to deepen its policies on social inclusion, gender equality, universal access to education and health, adding to the effective implementation of the recommendations accepted during this 4th cycle of the UPR. For the reasons set out above, we recommend the adoption of the report. Thank you. Thank you. I give the floor to distinguished representative of Zambia. The president apologizes. First, Vietnam.
Vietnam tiene la palabra, por favor.
Vietnam, you have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Vietnam commends the constructive engagement of Rwanda in this 4th UPR review cycle. We acknowledge Rwanda's continued efforts in promoting socio-economic development, reducing poverty, creating jobs, and expanding social protection and health coverage for its people. Vietnam appreciates Rwanda's consideration of the recommendation made by Vietnam, namely to strengthen national technical and vocational education and training to better align skills with labor market needs, especially for youth, and to further strengthen national food security and nutrition, prioritizing vulnerable households and regions most affected by malnutrition. We also welcome Rwanda's efforts to expand access to education, improve healthcare services, and support persons in vulnerable situations, including women, children, persons with disabilities, and older persons. Vietnam supports the adoption of the fourth EPR outcome report of Rwanda by consensus and wishes Rwanda every success in implementing the accepted recommendations. I thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor now to the distinguished representative of Zambia.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Zambia warmly welcomes Rwanda to the adoption of its UPR outcome report. We commend its positive response towards the majority of the recommendations received, including recommendations made by Zambia. This constructive engagement in the UPR process demonstrates Rwanda's commitment to cooperate with Human Rights Council mechanisms. Zambia further notes the measures undertaken by Rwanda to advance the promotion and protection of human rights, including institutional reform, socio-economic development, and access to education and healthcare. We wish the government of Rwanda success in implementing the accepted recommendations from the UPR session and respectfully request the Council to adopt Rwanda's UPR outcomes. I thank you.
Gracias, senador.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Armenia.
Mr. Vice President, Armenia warmly welcomes the distinguished delegation of Rwanda and thanks it for its commitment to the UPR process and for the updates provided during this review. We value Rwanda's willingness to accept a substantial number of recommendations, which reflects its continued engagement and commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights, as well as its efforts to strengthen national institutions and advance sustainable development in line with human rights obligations. We extend particular gratitude for accepting Armenia's recommendation to continue promoting the early warning and prevention of genocide agenda and to continue efforts to address genocide denial and other precursors of genocide. We also note with appreciation Rwanda's ongoing initiatives in advancing women's empowerment, expanding social protection programs, and strengthening institutional capacities to uphold human rights standards. Lastly, we express our full support for the adoption of the working group's report and wish the government of Rwanda every success in the implementation of the accepted recommendations. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra distinguida.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Botswana.
Botswana welcomes the delegation of Rwanda to the adoption of the UPR outcome. We acknowledge the continued efforts undertaken by Rwanda to strengthen its national human rights framework, including legislative reforms and reinforcement of institutional capacity. Botswana commends Rwanda for its sustained commitment to advancing this important work. It is gratifying to note that Rwanda has accepted a number of recommendations, including those proposed by Botswana. Rwanda's initiatives to promote inclusive governance through expanded citizen engagement channels such as toll-free telephone lines, digital platforms, suggestion boxes, and community forums reflect meaningful progress in fostering participation and accountability. Botswana supports the adoption of Rwanda's UPR outcome report and wishes government every success in implementing the recommendation it has accepted. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you. That was the last speaker that we could listen to during this segment for the participation of states. I would like to say that all these statements will be available online, including those that were not read out in the room. Now I would like to give the floor to other stakeholders, and the speaking time will be 2 minutes for all. I give the floor to Freedom Now.
Just in a country signals a broader crisis of human rights and democracy. When leaders jail people simply for peacefully exercising their rights, they disregard their laws that protect universal freedoms to maintain political control. This is clear in the case of my mother, Victoire Ingabire Umuhoza, a political opposition leader in Rwanda. She was arrested in June 2025 for the second time because President Paul Kagame saw her pro-democracy movement as a threat to his rule. Since her arrest, her right to fair trial has been repeatedly violated, to restriction on her access to counsel and her ability to prepare her defense. The ill treatment she suffers affect her physical health, while the restriction on contacting us, her family, take a heavy emotional toll. The government may hope that by removing her from public view, she will be silenced and forgotten. I'm speaking today to make sure that that does not happen. My mother's story is not unique. Submissions to Rwanda's UPR point to violations of the rights to life, liberty, security, and political participation. Political figures, independent journalists, and human rights defenders have been persecuted, detained, and prosecuted for criticizing the government. People have disappeared or died in custody, including gospel singer Kizito Mihigo and academic Aimable Caracera, whose deaths have still not been independently investigated. Rwanda has reaffirmed its commitment to advancing human rights. If this were genuine, my mother, Victoire Ingabire, and others would not be in jail with their rights violated and their lives at risk. Rwanda must immediately and unconditionally release prisoners of conscience and end its persecution of human rights defenders.
Gracias.
Thank you. The next speaker on my list is Development Assistance International video statement. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. We welcome the participation of the Republic of Rwanda in the Universal Periodic Review and the acceptance of recommendations related to the freedom of opinion and expression. We have some serious concerns. On 1st May 2026, several journalists were arrested in connection with their work, accused of publishing information that could incite so-called fear. These arrests raised concerns, and this is done in contravention of Article 19 of the ICCPR. We're also concerned about Rwanda's role in the conflict in the eastern DRC, given credible allegations of Rwandan support to the M23 movement. All of this despite the fact that these movements in the east of the DRC are committing serious human rights violations. In January 2026, Rwanda officially recognized that it maintains a security alliance with the aforementioned armed group. This undermines confidence in Rwanda's commitments. We require two things. First, the immediate release of those individuals who have exercised peacefully their rights, and secondly, to put an end to all military support by Rwanda to the M23 Rwanda and withdrawing Rwandan forces from Eastern DRC. Thank you. The next statement is a video statement by the East and Horn of Africa Human Rights Defenders Project.
Mr. President, we welcome Rwanda's support to 87% of all recommendations received, including on cooperation with UN and African mechanisms, investigating human rights violations. This is important as these were offered by states from all groups, and several related violations against opposition members, HRDs, and journalists. Civic space. Many states stress the importance of a safe and enabling environment for civil society and of upholding freedoms. This shows concern by the international community, to which the Rwandan authorities should give consideration. We encourage Rwanda to implement recommendations on registration requirements for NGOs, the law governing NGOs, and ending violence and intimidation against journalists and HRDs. We urge the government to prioritize the Sophos Meta recommendation on reviewing legislation, policies, and procedures that hinder the enjoyment of rights. We remain concerned about a discrepancy between government commitments and situations on the ground. Independent reports highlight that those specifically opposing the government face restrictions and threats. We are concerned about freedom of opinion and expression. The government noted a recommendation on the adoption of a media law. In our submission, we flag laws and practices that create a chilling effect for independent expression and reporting. The situation of HRDs and journalists. The government's rejection of recommendation number 134.126 seems to signal a refusal to recognize citizen journalists and online commentators as worthy of protection. In our report, we highlighted threats and attacks against journalists, activists, and critics. Freedom of peaceful assembly and association. Many of the issues highlighted by former Special Rapporteur Maina Kiai in his 2014 report are unaddressed. Some UPR recommendations in this regard were accepted. They should be operationalized. Thank you.
The next speaker on my list is a representative of Iliska Relief Foundation.
Merci, Monsieur le Vice-Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. The Foundation is pleased with the level of cooperation with the Human Rights Council and the UPR mechanism. Mr. Vice President, despite this cooperation, the facts on the ground reveal serious problems, particularly regarding conditions in prisons and detention centers. In May 2026, an academic and human rights activist died, prompting calls for an independent and transparent investigation into the circumstances of his death. This comes amidst ongoing harassment of human rights defenders. In June 2026, the Rwandan government arrested 2 journalists for reporting on conditions in an official detention center in Kigali on vague charges of disseminating information that incites fear. They were reportedly denied access to legal counsel during the initial days of their detention in violation of international human rights standards. In addition, Eliska remains concerned about Rwandan military support for the M23 movement in the DRC and the serious human rights violations committed, some which were perpetrated. This includes murder, torture, and recruitment of child soldiers. Therefore, Eliska calls on the Rwandan government to launch transparent investigation, publish their findings regarding deaths in Rwandan prisons, and to withdraw its forces from eastern DRC. Thank you. Thank you. I give the floor to the representative Center for Reproductive Rights. A video statement.
The Center for Reproductive Rights welcomes Rwanda's recent adoption of the law regulating health services, which increases access to sexual and reproductive health by removing third-party consent requirements for adolescents aged 15 and above. We also welcome Rwanda's acceptance of several recommendations to strengthen access to maternal and reproductive health and access to comprehensive sexuality education, which would strengthen the implementation of this law. We regret that Rwanda has not accepted a key recommendation on decriminalizing access to abortion in all circumstances. Rwanda has taken some steps to fulfill its obligations towards safeguarding the right to abortion. The 2018 Law on Determining Offenses and Penalties in General sets out the circumstances under which an abortion is legal, including if the pregnant person is a child, if the pregnancy was as a result of rape, post-marriage, or incest, or if the pregnant person is at risk, or if the fetus is at risk due to the pregnancy. However, the law still mandates that abortions be performed only by a recognized medical doctor, excluding other qualified medical practitioners. Given the limited number and uneven distribution of medical doctors, this requirement substantially restricts access to lawful abortion services and results in unnecessary delays, particularly for women and girls in rural and remote areas. As a result, some women resort to unsafe abortion. This remains a significant contributor to maternal mortality, accounting for an estimated 10% of maternal deaths in Rwanda. We urge the government of Rwanda to fully decriminalize abortion in line with international and regional human rights standards. We further call on Rwanda to remove unnecessary barriers to accessing lawful abortion by authorizing appropriately trained mid-level healthcare providers to abortion services, thereby ensuring that services are available, accessible, timely, and equitable for all who need them.
I give the floor to the representative of International Federation for Human Rights Leagues. Mr. Vice Presidents, the FHR, HROR, and the Reprodo takes note of the recommendations gathered by Rwandan government, particularly those to investigate cases of enforced disappearances, extrajudicial executions, torture, arbitration, detention, to investigate against the harassment against human rights defenders, journalists, members of the opposition, to create an enabling environment for defenders and to create an environment for human rights defenders. We also would like to express our disappointment that Rwanda's government continues to reject 37 recommendations. Our recommendations note the persistent refusal of the Rwandan state to adhere to the protocol set out in the International Bill for Human Rights, the Roman Statute, and to recognize extraterritorial obligations in terms of human rights and humanitarian law, including in the east of the DRC, exacerbated with conflict-related sexual violence. Its expressive reservation would stifle the effects of protective powers they contain. This has the effect of depriving Rwandan victims of any recourses and perpetuating impunity. Organizations would like to raise the Rwandan state's rejection of the recommendations on the protection of ethnic minorities. This contributes to the marginalization of the Batwa community, which is one of the most vulnerable communities. In such an environment where the political space is closed, where freedom of expression and association are constantly flouted by harassment of journalists and human rights defenders, where enforced disappearances are commonplace, citizens' hope is reduced to zero. The UPR process is not a communications exercise. To reject these vital rights without justification is to refuse to protect one's own citizens. We call on the Human Rights Council to monitor the Rwandan state full implementation of the accepted recommendations, hold Rwanda accountable for complying with all its international human rights obligations. Thank you. I now give the floor to the representative of Civicus.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Civicus and its partners welcome the government of Rwanda's engagement with the UPR process. In the previous review, Rwanda supported recommendations relating to civic space and human rights defenders and considered the implementation of those recommendations. While we welcome the revision of media law, which was meant to provide a framework to protect press freedom, the law remained restrictive, requiring journalists to obtain accreditation from state institutions rather than from independent self-regulatory bodies. We also note with concern that the institutional and legal impediments for sustained political space remain a challenge. The authorities continue to target and attack HRDs despite commitments made during the third UPR cycle to strengthen policies aimed at their protection. Investigation and accountability for perpetrators of human rights abuses never came to fruition. Major online and broadcast media are either state-run or largely pro-government, and outspoken independent newspapers no longer exist. The few private outlets that existed often practiced self-censorship, targeted journalists, human rights defenders, and political opponents who express critical views are silenced. We call on the government of Rwanda to immediately and urgently take proactive measures to implement all UPR recommendations, particularly pertaining to efforts to addressing civic space and human rights. We urge Rwanda to establish and uphold in law and in practice a supporting environment for civil society, ensure that individuals and organizations operate without undue state interference. We thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. Now the Minority Rights Group by video, please.
Mr. President, my name is Richard Nachitimana. I'm Executive Director of African Initiative for Mankind Progress Organization. Minority Rights Group and IMPO noted that Rwanda supported all recommendations related to poverty eradication, access to education, healthy, and employment. Many of these recommendations called for special attention to be paid to the vulnerable groups. Effort to eradicate poverty, literacy, unemployment, and promote access to health and adequate housing must reach the most marginalized population in the country. We recall that in its concluding observation in Rwanda, the Committee on Elimination of Racial Discrimination expressed concern that poverty, education, health, and employment indicators are extremely low for the Batwa in Rwanda in comparison to the rest of the population. The committee also expressed concern that the Batwa community in Rwanda faces extinction. It highlighted the government mission of Batwa cultural identity, threatening their survival. We urge Rwanda not to leave one more time the Batwa behind, as it works to implement accepted recommendations in line with the recommendations received from the treaty bodies. The government must implement targeted affirmative action to reduce Batwa poverty, improve their access to education, health, adequate housing, and employment. It should also provide land and resources to support Batwa agriculture and pottery. The government should develop specific policies to make sure that its development efforts are inclusive and non-discriminatory. And it should do so in close collaboration with affected communities and Batwa civil society organizations. Thank you.
A continuación.
We will now have another video from Christian Council International.
Thank you. I deliver this statement on behalf of Christian Council International. We commend the Republic of Rwanda for its constructive engagement with the UPR process and its consideration of the recommendations of the fourth cycle. We welcome Rwanda's recognition of the family as central to the protection and well-being of children and society. Strong families remain the fundamental group unit of society and deserve protection and recognition. We also commend Rwanda's decision to maintain the protection of unborn life and not support calls for the legalization of abortion in all circumstances. International law does not establish a right to abortion. The ICPD program of action clearly states that abortion should never be promoted as a method of family planning. Regarding commitments related to sexuality education and sexual reproductive health, we encourage approaches that respect the primary role of parents in the upbringing and education of their children. We also recall that there is no internationally agreed upon definition of sexual and reproductive health and rights, and it should not be interpreted as creating new international obligations, including a right to abortion. Finally, all persons deserve protection from violence and arbitrary discrimination, and existing human rights protections apply equally to all persons without creating separate categories of rights based on sexual orientation and gender identity. I thank you.
A continuación vamos a...
Thank you. Liberal International has the floor.
Mr. President, I deliver this statement on behalf of Liberal International, but also as the son of Rwandan opposition leader Victoire Ingabire Umuhoza, who remains detained in Rwanda. Liberal International remains deeply concerned by the shrinking democratic space in Rwanda and the increase of arbitrary detention against political opponents and government critics. During Rwanda's Universal Periodic Review, many states raised concerns regarding arbitrary detention, fair trial guarantees, freedom of expression, and restrictions on political participation. Yet, these concerns remain insufficiently addressed. Following the UPR session, I personally raised my mother's detention conditions with Rwanda's Minister of Justice and the chairperson of the National Human Rights Commission, who assured me that the Mandela rules were being respected. However, in reality, my mother was denied contact with her family for almost 300 days and only received a phone call after significant international pressure while my father was critically ill in the hospital. We therefore urge Rwanda to uphold its obligation under the ICCPR, guarantee fair trial rights and judicial independence, and ensure that peaceful political opposition can operate freely without fear of imprisonment or intimidation. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I now give the floor to Partners for Transparency.
شكرا السيد نائب الرئيس. ترحب مؤسسة شركاء بقبول رواندا.
Thank you very much, Vice President. Our organization welcomes the 249 recommendations accepted by Rwanda out of 286, and we welcome social protection measures and the fight against trafficking in persons. We're concerned that 37 recommendations were noted. These were on the ratification of the Rome Statute and the adoption of a law on the media to strengthen freedom of expression and of the press, and furthermore, measures to combat child marriage. There is corruption in the sporting sphere, and that's why the Secretary General of the Rwandan Football Federation is accused of having falsified documents and of having used public funds. So there is a problem regarding financial controls on sporting institutions. We are furthermore concerned by the M23 support on what's happening in Congo. So there have been aggressions against more than 50 persons, and thousands of people have been displaced, and there have been serious violations of human rights, including the right to life. To conclude, we call on the government to review its positions on the recommendations not accepted. Legislative measures must be taken to accede to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court and to combat child marriage. And there must be prosecution of cases of corruption in order to protect public funds. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. That was the last statement that we could accommodate during this segment. Before giving the floor to the delegation of Rwanda for concluding remarks, allow me to inform that according to information received of the 286 recommendations received from states, Rwanda supports 249 and 37 are noted. I now give the floor to Her Excellency, the Ambassador, for concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. On behalf of the government of Rwanda, again, I thank all delegations and civil society for engaging us today in this session. The recommendations we supported present an opportunity for further advancing human rights. They will be an important guide for our human rights agenda during the next 5 years, which will further enhance human rights safeguards in Rwanda. The preparations of the national implementation process, including awareness raising on the recommendations received during the review in January, are already underway. Indeed, stakeholder consultation took place after the Council's adoption of before the Council's adoption of the report. They commenced immediately after the interactive dialogue to build national ownership of the process and keep stakeholders and the public informed of the discussions and recommendations that we received in January. Rwanda's approach to human rights is closely tied to its broader socioeconomic development goals, guided by Vision 2050, which is our long-term strategic plan, and the National Strategy for Transformation. It's the second edition, which is the 5-year plan, strategic plan. We believe promoting and protecting human rights is a constitutional obligation and a foundation for inclusive and sustainable development. By investing in human capital, reducing poverty and inequality, strengthening accountable institutions, while ensuring that the benefits of development reaches all segments of society, Rwanda aims to create a society in which every person can live in dignity, exercise their rights, and contribute meaningfully to national progress. As we conclude the 4th cycle, we recognize that the real measure of success will be the work ahead. Rwanda will pursue implementation actively and transparently through partnerships with national institutions, civil society, community stakeholders, and the development partners that work with us closely. Mr. Vice President, allow me to conclude by once again expressing our sincere appreciation to all stakeholders, including member states, civil society organizations, United Nations agencies, the private sector, development partners, and government institutions for their commitment, the hard work, and invaluable contribution through this review. I will end, Mr. Vice President, by mentioning how Rwanda takes all human rights concerns seriously. And I invite civic societies that have engaged the mission in this session to address us particularly on the matters that were raised. We have a mission here and we are representing the government of Rwanda, and it will be important for us to have a constructive dialogue with all that have participated today, especially the representative of Freedom Now and Liberal International. We had, as he mentioned, had the head of our delegation, Dr. Ubugirashe Buja, the Minister of Justice, exchange with him and the representative he was with. And we thought that it was a constructive engagement. And there was recommendations that were provided in the case that you mentioned. So we would continue to engage so that we can address all concerns. I thank you so much, Mr. Vice President.
Muchas gracias.
I thank Her Excellency for this presentation, for the constructive participation of Rwanda throughout the UPR process. I now propose that the Council adopt the decision on the outcome of the Universal Periodic Review of Rwanda as it appears on the screen.
Convenes el formato.
This is a standard decision where if there are no objections, I can take it that the decision is adopted. This appears to be the case, so it stands adopted. Thank you very much. And we will now briefly suspend the meeting before we turn our attention to considering the outcome of Nepal.
Bueno, muchas gracias por su...
Thank you very much for your patience. We will now proceed with the consideration of the outcome of Nepal. The outcome is based, just like in previous adoptions, the report of the Working Group on the UPR of Nepal and its addendum. And these documents, together with the additional information that will now be provided by Nepal, will constitute the outcome of the review. And the Council will adopt them through a standardized decision, just like we've been doing this afternoon. I now have the pleasure to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Ram Prasad Subedi, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary and Permanent Representative of Nepal, so that he can present additional information on the review. Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the Government of Nepal, I have the honor to address the 62nd session of Human Rights Council this afternoon and provide additional information on the adoption of the outcome report of the UPR Working Group on Nepal's fourth cycle Universal Periodic Review. We appreciate the opportunity to engage in the interactive dialogue held on 21st January 2026 during the 51st session of the UPR Working Group, which allowed us to evaluate the achievement, identify the challenges, and strengthen measures to advance human rights in the country. We extend sincere appreciation to all the delegation for their constructive engagement, thoughtful recommendations, and continued cooperation throughout the review process. Nepal received a total of 284 recommendations from 101 delegations of member and observer states, reflecting the spirit of dialogue, cooperation, and shared commitment to protection and promotion of all human rights. Nepal greatly values the spirit of cooperation that underpinned the review process. We believe that the Universal Periodic Review remains one of the most significant mechanisms of the Human Rights Council, founded on the principle of universality. We are encouraged by the recognition and positive observation made by the delegation on Nepal's progress in strengthening democratic institutions, preserving vibrant civic space, and ensuring social justice. Nepal's cooperation with the United Nations Human Rights Mechanism and its commitment to the protection and promotion of human rights in line with the national priorities and international obligation received equal appreciation during the interactive dialogue. Nepal remains committed to building on the progress achieved, addressing remaining challenges, and continuously improving human rights in the country. Each recommendation received during the review has been carefully examined through an inclusive review process involving extensive consultation among ministries, departments, and agencies of the Government of Nepal, the National Human Rights Commission, partners, and stakeholders. Mr. Vice President, we are pleased to confirm that following the review process, out of 284 recommendations received, 225 recommendations, which is 79.23%, enjoy the support of Government of Nepal. Furthermore, 57 recommendations are noted. An additional clarification is provided on another 2 recommendations. The accepted recommendations represent Nepal's priorities in such areas as strengthening National Human Rights Commission, advancing transitional justice, enhancing access to justice and promoting accountability, safeguarding freedom of expression, promoting gender equality, and empowering women, enhancing youth employment and social protection, improving access to healthcare services, including sexual and reproductive health, expanding access to education, mitigating the impacts of climate change and environmental degradation, protecting the rights of the child and strengthening juvenile justice, advancing the rights of persons with disabilities, indigenous people, Dalits, and the LGBTQA+ persons, protecting migrant workers, and establishing a permanent national mechanism for implementation, reporting, and follow-up, among others. A dedicated mechanism has been established under the Office of the Prime Minister and Council of Ministers of Nepal to coordinate, monitor, and follow up the implementation of the UPR recommendation of the fourth cycle in the next 4 years. We have taken note of the 57 recommendations that require careful consideration, further consultation, and national dialogue. Nevertheless, we reiterate our commitment to continue strengthening our national, legal, and institutional capacity to advance human rights in the country. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Agradezco a su excelencia.
My thanks to His Excellency for that statement. And pursuant to paragraph 13 of the Annex of Human Rights Council Resolution 1621, I will now give the floor to the National Human Rights Commission of Nepal. You have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, on behalf of the National Human Rights Commission of Nepal, we express sincere thanks to the Secretariat, the Human Rights Council members, and the working group for their prominent role in UPR process. The Commission has always encouraged and also warned the government of Nepal to protect and promote human rights in the country. The government should ensure justice and compensation as recommended by the Commission, including its recent recommendation to execute and prosecute perpetrators of human rights violations during the Geneva movement in September last year. The Commission has raised the concern, and member states have also repeatedly recommended strengthening the Commission by amending its legislation to ensure more functional and financial autonomy. Conflict-era victims demand for trustworthy transitional justice commissions be established soon to address their concern and ensure justice for them. The government must take action against caste-based discrimination, violence against women and minors, and upgrade juvenile centers, as well as ensure ESC rights guaranteed by the Constitution of Nepal. And finally, I request all delegates to adopt UN Convention on Rights of Older Persons. I thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. And we can now turn to member states and observers so that they can make their comments on the outcome of the review. Speaking time is 1 minute, 30 seconds for all speakers. And the first speaker I can give the floor to is the distinguished representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Pakistan thanks Nepal for presenting the outcome of its fourth cycle Universal Periodic Review. We welcome Nepal's acceptance of a large number of recommendations, including those put forward by Pakistan. We take note of the challenging circumstances faced by Nepal. The country's continued progress towards fulfilling its human rights obligation, therefore, merits this Council's appreciation. We also appreciate Nepal's constructive engagement with the United Nations human rights system, including the Universal Periodic Review process. We welcome the government's resolve to further strengthen its national human rights framework through continued institutional, legislative, and policy measures. Pakistan wishes Nepal every success in implementing the accepted recommendations and supports the adoption of its UPR outcome report by consensus. I thank you very much.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la
Thank you. I give the floor to the representative of the Philippines.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. The Philippines warmly welcomes Nepal's delegation to the adoption of the outcome of its fourth cycle Universal Periodic Review and appreciates its constructive engagement in this process. The Philippines acknowledges with appreciation Nepal's acceptance of our recommendations to continue strengthening the National Human Rights Commission and further reinforce the policies and mechanisms that uphold the human rights of all, particularly those in situations of vulnerability, consistent with the principles of equality and non-discrimination. Mr. Vice President, the Philippines endorses the adoption of the outcome of Nepal's Universal Periodic Review and wishes it every success in implementing the recommendations it has accepted. I thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the representative of the Russian Federation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice President. The Russian delegation, with satisfaction, takes note the fourth UPR cycle of the UPR. We thank Nepal for the written information related to the recommendations that were addressed to the country. We take note that the majority of the recommendations, including all of the Russian recommendations, have been accepted. This reflects the continuation of the work of the government towards the protection and promotion of human rights and readiness to work and cooperate with international monitoring mechanism. We take note with satisfaction the steps taken to review national legislation in order to ensure more effective realization in practice of constitutional provisions and international obligations of country. We note the responsible approach of Nepal to implementation of its obligations within the treaty bodies. We recommend the adoption of the report on Nepal as part of this fourth UPR. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Singapore.
Vice President, Singapore congratulates the delegation of Nepal on its fourth Universal Periodic Review. We commend Nepal for its engagement with the UPR process and its consideration of various recommendations put forth by delegations. We thank Nepal for accepting both of our recommendations. First, to strengthen its efforts to protect children's rights. Second, to strengthen its efforts to promote the participation of persons with disabilities in public life. Singapore supports the adoption of the Working Group's report on Nepal's UPR. Thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra Dinghi.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of South Sudan.
Mr. Vice President, South Sudan welcomed the distinguished delegation of Nepal on the adoption of its UPR outcome and expresses its gratitude for its continued constructive engagement in the UPR process. We commend Nepal for its firm commitment to the principle of the United Nations Charter, international human rights law, and for its belief in the universality of human rights, including being a party to 7 core human rights conventions. South Sudan further commends Nepal for its continued engagement with the United Nations human rights systems through constructive cooperation and for taking all possible measures to promote and protect women's rights. We thank and appreciate Nepal for accepting a total of 224 recommendations out of 284 received, including 2 recommendations submitted by South Sudan. South Sudan extends its best wishes to Nepal for the successful implementation of the accepted UPR recommendation and offers its steadfast support for the adoption of its UPR outcome by consensus. Thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sri Lanka.
Mr. Vice President, Sri Lanka appreciates the constructive engagement by the government of Nepal at its fourth UPR review in January 2026. We commend Nepal for accepting all 5 recommendations made by Sri Lanka. We appreciate the constructive engagement of the government of Nepal with the United Nations human rights mechanisms and welcome Nepal's commitment to strengthen investments in quality and inclusive education for all children. In conclusion, Sri Lanka recommends adopting Nepal's fourth UPR report and wish success in its implementation. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to UN Women.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. UN Women commends Nepal for its continued engagement with the UPR and its constitutional guarantees for equality and non-discrimination. Nepal's recent institutional reforms, including the mandate restructuring of the Ministry of Women, Children, Gender, and Sexual Minorities, demonstrate a commitment to a more inclusive governance. Women's parliamentary representation has surpassed the constitutional threshold, reaching 34.9%. Nepal has successfully criminalized harmful traditional practices and increased gender-responsive budgeting to over 44%. The government's recent endorsement of the CEDAW roadmap and its commitment to access to justice marks significant progress. While these are positive steps, implementation gaps persist as access to justice is constrained by limited implementation, while gaps remain in multi-sectoral support services. Concerns remain regarding the impact of discriminatory nationality laws on women's ability to confer citizenship and existing social norms that perpetuate gender-based violence, including emerging technology-facilitated and climate-induced forms. To accelerate progress, UN Women recommends, first, strengthen legal measures to guarantee proportional representation for women in line with CEDAW General Recommendation 40. Second, adopt comprehensive legislation addressing emerging forms of violence and strengthen multi-sectoral response mechanisms. Third, invest in nationwide social norms change and reform nationality laws. UN Women remains a committed partner in translating commitments into rights-based outcomes. I thank you.
Gracias. A continuación,
Thank you. Now I'll listen to a video statement by the UNFPA.
Mr. President, UNFPA congratulates the government of Nepal on its constructive engagement with the Universal Periodic Review, reflecting its continued commitment to advancing human rights. Nepal has demonstrated strong leadership in advancing the ICPD agenda. This is clearly reflected in the constitutional guarantee of reproductive rights, the Safe Motherhood and Reproductive Health Rights Act, and the recently adopted National Population Policy. We commend Nepal's progress in expanding access to quality health services, reducing maternal mortality, and strengthening responses to gender-based violence. Furthermore, we welcome Nepal's commitment to investing in sexual and reproductive health commodities through initiatives like the Compact Agreement under the UNFPA Supplies Partnership. The UPR recommendations offer a vital roadmap to accelerate progress, particularly in ending child marriage, eliminating gender-based violence, and expanding services for those furthest behind. As Nepal navigates key demographic shifts, sustained investments in women, girls, and young people remains critical to achieving inclusive development. UNFPA stands ready to support the government of Nepal in translating these commitments into concrete policies and results, ensuring that rights and choices for all are fully realized. Thank you.
gracias.
Thank you. I give the floor to the representative of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. UNHCR commends Nepal's longstanding commitment to hosting refugees and its facilitation of the resettlement of over 113,000 Bhutanese refugees. Despite not being a party to the 1951 Refugee Convention and lacking a formal asylum framework, Nepal is recognized for its pragmatic and humanitarian approach to refugee protection. UNHCR welcomes recent progress, including the renewal of refugee ID cards, resumption of birth recording, issuance of travel documents to Bhutanese and Tibetan refugees, and the waiving of visa fees for those pursuing solutions or return. UNHCR encourages Nepal to continue issuance of essential documentation to all refugees, including refugee identity and permanent account number cards, to enhance access to services. It further recommends strengthening the refugee protection framework in line with international human rights standards, including upholding the principles of non-refoulement and non-penalization of asylum seekers, and acceding to the Refugee Convention alongside the development of national refugee legislation. While welcoming recent citizenship law reforms, UNHCR remains concerned about constitutional provisions that limit mothers' equal rights to confer citizenship. It urges Nepal to ensure full gender equality and citizenship and to ratify the Statelessness Conventions. UNHCR remains fully committed to working with the government of Nepal to support the implementation of relevant UPR recommendations with the shared objective of ensuring that no one is left behind. I thank you.
Gracias. Tiene la palabra la representante.
Thank you. I give the floor to the representative of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Thank you very much, Vice President. I would like to extend a warm welcome to the delegation of Nepal and thank the delegation for the very important presentation. We highlight the comprehension of the country of the UPR mechanism and the progress achieved in the area of human rights. We thank the country especially for accepting the 3 recommendations made by my delegation. We encourage Nepal to continue the strengthening its policies to combat discrimination against women, girls, Dalits, and indigenous peoples, to guarantee inclusive education, promote measures that facilitate access of women to posts of responsibility, ensuring the effective implementation of the recommendations accepted during the 4th UPR cycle. For the reasons above, we recommend the adoption of the report. Thank you. Thank you. I give the floor to Distinguished Representative of Vietnam.
Mr. Vice President, Vietnam warmly welcomes the declaration of Nepal and appreciates its constructive participation in the 4th cycle of the UPR. We commend Nepal's continued commitment to advancing human rights through its constitutional, legal, and policy frameworks, as well as its efforts to promote social justice, inclusive development, and the protection of persons in vulnerable situations. Improving access to quality healthcare, including maternal and newborn care in public health facilities, and to further enhance access to quality education to scholarships, schools, school meals, and inclusive learning support for children with disabilities. We encourage Nepal to continue implementing accepted recommendations in a practical and people-centered manner, with the support of international cooperation where needed. Vietnam supports the adoption of Nepal's UPR outcome report by consensus and wishes Nepal's success in its follow-up report. I thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you. The next speaker on my list is the representative of Yemen video statement.
President, we wish to express our thanks to the UPR working group and the Troika members for their efforts in preparing this report. We acknowledge the participatory methodology adopted by Nepal in preparing its national report, as well as its efforts to consolidate its legislative and constitutional human rights frameworks, together with implementing the National Human Rights Plan of Action. In closing, Yemen underscores its ongoing support for Nepal's efforts to protect and promote human rights, and we recommend the adoption of the work
and congratulate the country on its commitment to the UPR process. We also congratulate the country on the acceptance of a majority of recommendations, including the recommendations made by Albania, namely the strengthening of national human rights commissions, and also the second recommendation related to combating impunity. Nation based on caste, and we encourage the authorities to fully implement the recommendations accepted during this UPR cycle. In conclusion, I would like to recommend the Council to adopt the
our appreciation to the friendly country of Nepal. We acknowledge its participatory methodology adopted during the preparation of its report. We seize this opportunity to express our appreciation for Nepal's acceptance of our recommendation. It's a step which highlights the efforts deployed by Nepal in order to promote basic rights and achieve comprehensive
Thank you. Now I'll give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Bahrain. I do not think.
Daríamos la palabra a la siguiente delegación en la lista. Tiene la palabra la representante de Belarus.
I give the floor to the representative of Belarus. Thank you very much, Deputy Vice President. Welcome the participation of Nepal in the fourth UPR cycle. We take note with satisfaction the fact that Nepal accepted recommendations made by Belarus, including in terms of cross-border cooperation in trafficking in human beings and broadening the network of safe shelters to provide assistance to victims of trafficking. We note the constructive participation of the government of Nepal in the UPR process and its continued interaction with the mechanism on the basis of dialogue and cooperation. We wish the government of Nepal to continue its work in ensuring the well-being and the rights of its population in line with national priorities. Thank you. Now I give the floor to the delegation of Brunei Darussalam.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Brunei Darussalam extends its sincere appreciation to the delegation of Nepal for the updates on the encouraging progress achieved since ensuring access to sufficient, safe, and nutritious food for all, and strengthening the healthcare systems to ensure equitable access for all. In this regard, we recommend the adoption of the UPR Working Group report and wish Nepal's success in the implementation of the accepted recommendation. I thank you.
Thank you. I give the floor to the distinguished delegation of Burkina Faso. Mr. Vice President, Burkina Faso would like to extend a warm welcome to the delegation of Nepal, and we thank the delegation for additional information provided to the Council. My delegation welcomes the acceptance by Nepal in their entirety, the majority of the recommendations situation in their country. In conclusion, Burkina Faso would like to wish full success to Nepal in the implementation of accepted recommendations and the fourth UPR cycle. We praise the country for accepting the majority of recommendations, and we also praise the fact that Nepal accepted the recommendation made by Cameroon related to promotion of equality on the basis of inclusivity. My country believes we should adopt the report in order to support the work by Nepal in the area of the promotion and protection of human rights. And in conclusion, I'd like to wish Nepal full success in the implementation of accepted recommendations. Thank you. And I now give the floor to
中国代表团赞赏尼泊尔。
Excuse me.
Yes, let's start again.
Thank you. And its steady progress in the rule of law, including laws and policies on the right of the child, gender equality, and social justice. We appreciate Nepal's acceptance of China's recommendations. We hope it will continue to work to further improve the human rights legal framework, policies, and strategies, and take effective measures to protect the rights of people with disabilities and ethnic minorities and eliminate child marriage. We support the Council adopting Nepal's UPR outcome report. I thank you.
Thank you. I apologize for the technical issue. Now, with this, we have concluded with the list of declarations that we could accommodate in this moment. And let me remind you that all statements, including those which could not be delivered due to time
Solidarity Network, focusing on systematic caste-based discrimination and untouchability in Nepal. It manifests as social exclusion and severe violence against Dalit, especially Dalit women and girls. We welcome the government of Nepal's commitment Act 2011. The Dalit community faced severe gaps in land ownership, politics, higher education, and employment, despite caste-based discrimination being legally abolished in 1963. This discrimination remains widespread, often leading to social bias and personal violence over intercaste marriage. The tragic rape and murder case of 16 years old Enisa BK has triggered public outrage and nationwide protests demanding accountability for violence against women and Dalit communities. We welcome the historic appointment of Honorable Sita Badi as first Dalit women federal cabinet minister. However, the state's apology to the Dalit community remains unbacked by structural reform and economic reparation. We recommend the government of Nepal to enforce caste-based discrimination laws with strictly accountability, institutional transparency, zero tolerance. Formulate an actionable national strategy to fully implement all accepted UPR recommendations. Ensure a 14% Dalit participation rate in parliament through both first past the post and proportional representation electoral system. We thank you.
Thank you. I now give the floor to the representative of the Lutheran World Federation joint statement.
Mr. Vice President, the Lutheran World Federation, FCA, FEM, the Center for Dalit Women, and the feminist Dalit organization commend Nepal for its constructive engagement with the UPR mechanism and welcome its support for key recommendations regarding the protection of women against gender-based violence, GBV, and the eradication of child marriage. We commend Nepal's constitutional prohibition of all forms of discrimination, which explicitly safeguards the rights of Dalit communities, as well as the mandate of the National Dalit Commission to monitor, protect, and promote these rights. We recognize the critical role of local traditional communities in improving access to justice for survivors of GBV at the grassroots level. Despite this notable progress, significant gaps remain. We urge the government to intensify its efforts to prevent and respond to all forms of violence against women and girls. We call on Nepal to expedite the operationalization of dedicated Dalit desks at police stations nationwide to effectively address case-based discrimination and associated harmful traditional practices. While we appreciate the government's stated zero-tolerance policy towards GBV, we stress the urgent need to address the root causes of child marriage. Future legal frameworks must be carefully calibrated to ensure they do not inadvertently result in criminalization of victims. We urge the government to take decisive action to end child and forced marriage, fully implement the National Action Plan to end child marriage, adopt comprehensive legislation on GBV, and strengthen multi-sectoral survivor-centered and rights-based response mechanisms, and to eliminate untouchability, along with all forms of intersecting discrimination and violence against Dalit women and girls, underrepresented castes, indigenous peoples, and persons with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll listen to a video statement, a joint statement by Drei König Sanktion Hilfswerk der katholischen Jungschar.
DK Austria, on behalf of this coalition, welcomes the constructive participation of Nepal in the UPR. Despite several legal reforms, land tenure insecurity still undermines access to housing, food, and the livelihood. In line with the recommendations 61.206 and 269 supported by Nepal, we call to strengthen land titling process, including for women, and advance reforms focused on small-scale farmers, land lease, and the sharecroppers. We welcome Nepal's acceptance of recommendation 61.141 to 146 to prevent and reduce hunger while ensuring long-term food security, especially for the vulnerable rural communities and the disadvantaged castes. Despite the Right to Food and the Food Sovereignty Act 2018, gaps in the policy coherence, weak institutional mechanism, and the fragmented federal coordination hinders implementation. We urge Nepal to promptly implement relevant UPR recommendation in line with the Constitution of Nepal. Recovering from climate-induced losses. Many children and the youths in the rural areas still faces challenges in accessing quality education and the basic services. We encourage Nepal to promptly implement recommendations 61.127, 2132, 157, and 167 to improve access to quality healthcare, education, and the decent work, particularly in the rural areas, in order to reduce peasant youth migration and promote self-employment. Nepal must act now to transform its responsibilities under UNDROP into bold, enforceable measures that guarantee peasants' youth secure access to land, fair markets, and a dignified livelihood. Thank you.
A continuación.
I'm Sabin Shrestha, representing the Equality Now and Forum for Women Law and Development. I urge and call upon the government of Nepal to address three critical legal concerns. First, with respect of to ensure that all forms of non-consensual sexual penetration are covered within the definition of the rape, and are encouraged that the government-supported recommendation to enact the comprehensive legislation to cover all forms of gender-based violence. Of conflict-related sexual violence from the decade-long armed conflict. We call upon the government to completely remove the statute of limitation for all sexual violence offenses, including the conflict-related cases. Third, the Sexual Harassment at the Workplace Prevention Act 2014 applies exclusively to formal employment relationship. The majority of women engaged in the broader informal sector remains entirely without equivalent legal protections. We call upon the government to take the immediate step to implement the recommendation which it has supported on the issue, and to amend the Sexual Harassment at the Workplace Prevention Act 2014 to extend its scope to informal sector workers. We commend the government of Nepal for its robust engagement with the UPR process. Thank you.
The next speaker on my list is the representative of the Jubilee Campaign Joint Statement.
Thank you, Vice President. Jubilee Campaign and Christian Solidarity International would like to thank the delegation of Nepal for engaging with the Universal Periodic Review process. At the previous 2015 review, Nepal supported recommendations 121.16 and 122.40 to implement the new constitution and ensure the rights of minority populations in Nepal. In order to comply with its obligations under international law, the state of Nepal, under the new leadership, should work to amend Article 26.3 of its constitution and Section 158 of its penal code by the next reporting period to clarify that proselytization is allowed and that only forcible conversion is prohibited. Constitutional provision on religious freedom, the Part 3B that's problematic, it adds that no person shall, in the exercise of the right conferred by this article, do or cause to be done any act which may be contrary to public health, decency, and morality, or breach of public peace. And we would recommend that this section that I'm going to read now be removed, convert another person from one religion to another, or any act of or conduct that may jeopardize others' religion, and such act shall be punishable by law. We recommend that this second part of 3 of the Constitution be amended or removed because it's unclear, vague, and applied discriminatorily. And as the Nepal has committed to promote freedom of expression. We're very thankful that you supported many recommendations with this regard. We see this change in the Constitution as necessary. And secondly, I mentioned Section 158, which also has been used to discriminatorily and been used to target specifically minority beliefs. And we would recommend that also be reviewed. And also in the there's an extraterritorial application of Section 158 of the Penal Code.
Thank you. Now we'll listen to another video statement. FIAN International.
FIAN International and FIAN Nepal welcomes the acceptance by the government of recommendations related to preventing and reducing hunger with the participation and accountability towards the most disadvantaged, enhancing community-based climate change adaptation, and strengthening the implementation and monitoring of food security, housing, land, and water programs by
The interpreters apologize. Poor sound quality does not allow for interpretation.
Challenges regarding the implementation of the Right to Food and Food Sovereignty Act 2018. The Act foresees the development of National Food Plan, intended as a fundamental umbrella framework guiding federal, provincial, and local governments. However, to date, the government has not taken any concrete steps to develop the plan, which prevents provincial and local governments from effectively implementing it. We call on Nepal to fully implement previous and newly accepted UPR recommendations by formulating a comprehensive national food plan aligned with the locally formulated annual and periodic plans, and by localizing through concrete actions and with adequate resources the recommendations relevant to the
The next speaker on my list is the representative of Asian Forum for Human Rights and Development, joint statement.
Vice President, we welcome Nepal's engagement with the UPR and its support for majority of the recommendations, including to protect freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and association, and to strengthen transitional justice. However, many of the recommendations Nepal did not support relate to the legal and institutional reforms necessary to make these commitments meaningful, such as recommendations to establish independent accountability mechanisms for state violence and to adopt comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation. Recent developments underscore the importance of meaningful implementation of these recommendations. During the September 2025 protest, 77 people were killed, many reportedly as a result of lethal force by security forces. Although the government committed to an inquiry, investigation reports remain unpublished and no one has been held accountable. At the same time, the draft bill to dissolve the Social Welfare Council and shift regulation of NGOs to the Ministry of Home Affairs risks further restricting the environment for civil society. Similarly, while Nepal accepted recommendations to strengthen transitional justice and prohibit amnesties for gross violations, it did not support recommendations to amend the transitional justice law that includes the arbitrary classification of human rights violations, creating a situation where even international crimes such as war crimes and crimes against humanity may enjoy amnesty. Nepal further declined key reforms sought by victims and survivors, such as removing the 3-month limitation period for complaints before the transitional justice bodies and abolishing the statutes of limitation for reporting rape and other sexual violence. We urge Nepal to ensure that new appointments for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the Commission on Enforced Disappearances are made through an independent, impartial, and transparent process, and that the transitional justice process is genuinely victim and survivor-centered, guaranteeing truth, reparations, and justice. Many of the recommendations that Nepal did not support reflect the demands raised during the September 2025 protests for accountability, institutional reform, and equal rights.
Thank you. We will now hear a video statement from the International Service for Human Rights.
I am speaking as an indigenous Neva woman to highlight the continuing situation faced by indigenous communities in Nepal. We welcome Nepal's acceptance of the UPR recommendations relating to the rights of indigenous peoples' participation in decision-making, access to justice, and the protection of fundamental freedoms. Despite this positive outcome and commitments, the current legislations and policies are insufficient to guarantee our rights. Development projects continue to proceed without meaningful consultations through indigenous people's own customary institutions and without obtaining their free, prior, and informed consent. In particular, indigenous women continue to face barriers to meaningfully participate in decisions affecting their communities. As a result, indigenous people suffer multiple and intersectional human rights violations. This has been the case of the Kathmandu Tarai Made's fast-track projects related to road expansion and other business and infrastructure projects that continue to report inadequate consultations, lack of epic, loss of ancestral lands and resources, and insufficient access to effective remedies. We also remain concerned by restriction on the right to peaceful assembly and the use of unjustified restriction and disproportionate use of force and weapons against peaceful protesters. Many of these cases remain without prompt, independent, impartial, and effective investigations. We call on this new government, which is so full of promise, to be genuine in its solidarity with indigenous peoples and translate the accepted recommendations into concrete actions by aligning its laws and policies with the UN declarations on the rights of indigenous peoples and the ILO Convention 169. Ensuring the epic before approving projects, protecting indigenous people's right to their lands, territories, and resources, guaranteeing effective remedies, and ensuring the full and meaningful participation of indigenous peoples in decisions that affect them. We also call on the government to guarantee the right to peaceful protest and the right to defend human rights. The success of Nepal's UPR will ultimately be measured by real improvements in the lives of indigenous peoples. Thank you.
A continuación vamos.
Thank you. There will now be a further video from Plan International.
Namaste. My name is Sadiksha. I'm 22 years old youth advocate from Nepal. I'm honored to have contributed to Nepal's first youth-led civil society report for the Universal Periodic Review and have participated in the UPR pre-session. I welcome the Human Rights Council decision today and appreciate the efforts for the government of Nepal, member states, civil society organizations, and the stakeholders who have contributed to this important process. The meaningful participation of children, adolescents, and young people throughout Nepal's UPR process has helped ensure that our voices are heard and our priorities are reflected. Young people across Nepal continue to face challenges, including child, early, and forced marriage, gender-based violence, barriers to inclusive education, and limited opportunities to participate in decisions that affect their lives. The recommendations made through this process provide an important pathway towards addressing these issues and advancing the rights of children and young people. The true value of this process lies not only in the commitments made, but in the actions that follow. I remain hopeful that the commitments and the discussion taking place to the day will lead to tangible improvements in the lives of children, young people across Nepal. Together, we can build a future where every child, every young person can live with dignity, equality, and opportunity. Thank you.
The last statement that we'll be able to accommodate during this segment is a further video statement from ILGA World.
President, this statement is delivered in consultation with Blue Diamond Society and the Federation of Sexual and Gender Minorities Nepal, civil society organizations working on LGBTI rights in Nepal. We welcome the renaming of the ministry as the Ministry of Women, Children, Gender and Sexual Minorities and Social Security, reflecting increased recognition of LGBTI people within government structures. We also welcome efforts to integrate our rights into policies, programs, development planning, and legal reform. We commend the 10 member states that made 11 recommendations concerning the rights of LGBTI people. We appreciate Nepal's support for recommendations on implementing court decisions protecting LGBTI persons, adopting an intersectional approach to discrimination, and ensuring equitable access to sexual and reproductive health services for all. At the same time, we are concerned that Nepal noted key recommendations on comprehensive anti-discrimination legislation, prohibition of conversion therapy, citizenship based on self-determination, and marriage equality. This is particularly concerning given Nepal's constitutional guarantees of equality, landmark Supreme Court jurisprudence, and the recent Supreme Court judgment affirming equal marriage rights for a same-sex couple. Full implementation of this recommendation would strengthen Nepal's regional leadership and help ensure that legal recognition translates into practical protection, dignity, and equality for affected communities. We therefore encourage the government of Nepal to continue constructive engagement with civil society and affected communities and to take concrete steps toward legal and policy reforms that guarantee equal rights and protection for all persons regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or sex characteristics. Thank you.
Bien, antes de
Thank you. Before I give the floor once again to the delegation of Nepal for their concluding remarks, allow me to inform you that according to the information received, out of 284 recommendations received, 225 enjoy the support of Nepal and 57 are noted. Additional clarification was provided on 2 further recommendations by the delegation, indicating which parts they support and which parts were simply noted. I now give the floor to His Excellency for concluding remarks. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Mr. Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, Nepal approaches this Council with renewed commitment and a deep sense of responsibility to uphold human rights and fundamental freedom. The 4th cycle of Universal Periodic Review provided us a valuable opportunity to engage in an open, inclusive, and constructive dialogue. Nepal extends sincere appreciation to the delegations of HRC members and observer states, National Human Rights Commission, United Nations agencies, civil society organizations, and the delegations that took floor during the interactive segment of this adoption and offered important observation and inputs. Our appreciation also goes to the delegation that provided important recommendation during Nepal's review at the 51st session of UPR Working Group held on 21st January 2026 for their constructive engagement and continued cooperation. We would like to thank the Troika comprising Mexico, Qatar, and South Africa, the UPR Secretariat, OHCHR, UNOG Conference Services, and the interpreters for their valuable work in facilitating the review process. Nepal approached this review with openness and commitment to all human rights. Nepal is fully committed to the effective implementation of the accepted recommendation, because these recommendations will guide our effort to the protection and promotion of human rights in the country as we continue to advance reform, strengthen the rule of law, and promote good governance and improve well-being of our people. In order to translate this commitment into tangible results, we will continue to work closely with all stakeholders in the country, in whole of government and whole of society efforts. And we look forward to receiving continuous cooperation from the international community and development partners. A vibrant democracy, Nepal remains fully committed to uphold human rights, fundamental freedoms, and the rule of law. We served as the member of the Human Rights Council for 2 consecutive terms, starting 2018 to 2020 and 2021 to 2023. We have placed our candidacy for the HRC membership for the term 2027-29, reflecting our long-standing commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights at both national and international levels, in the spirit of principle of universality. I take this opportunity to request all UN members to support our candidacy for the HRC membership. We uphold the Universal Periodic Review mechanism and value its cooperative spirit. We look forward to continue working with all partners as we move forward to implement the outcome of this full cycle review. I thank you, Mr. Vice President.
Muchas gracias,
Thank you, Ambassador, for your statement and in general for the constructive participation of Nepal throughout the UPR process. I now propose that the Council adopt the decision on the outcome of the UPR review of Nepal as it appears on the screen, and this is the same format we've been using all afternoon.
No veo en la sala.
I see no objection to the adoption, and it therefore stands adopted. This brings us to the conclusion of the review of Nepal, but I would like to stay in your seats because we'll have a very brief technical break and then the Council will have to make a decision. Thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished representatives, colleagues, allow me to address an urgent matter concerning the 62nd session. On 29 June 2026, I received a letter from the Permanent Representative of the United Kingdom to the United Nations Office and other international organizations in Geneva on behalf of Germany, Ireland, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Norway, and United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, requesting the holding of an urgent debate during the ongoing 62nd session of the Human Rights Council to address the human rights situation in and around El Obeid, North Kordofan, in the context of the ongoing conflict in the Sudan. This communication was immediately circulated to all members and observers of the Council. I would like to recall that the request to hold an urgent debate requires a decision by the Council to adjust its program of work. This is done at the request of at least one member of the Council. For information, 12 urgent debates have been held to date in the Council, and in accordance with these precedents, the urgent debate would be organized under Agenda Item 1. The urgent debate may be followed by the adoption of a resolution on the matter, provided that the main sponsors submit a draft resolution at least 24 hours prior to its adoption and hold at least one informal consultation. Earlier today, the Bureau discussed the request and concluded that the urgent debate could take place on Friday, July 3rd at 10 a.m. Concerning the urgent debate's impact on the remainder of the program of work for this session, the Secretariat informed the Bureau that one additional meeting would need to be added to the session in order for the Council to complete its program of work. The Division of Conference Management has agreed to provide conference services for an additional meeting on July 8th for the Council to conclude its work. Consequently, the Council would conclude its work on Wednesday, July 8th, instead of July 7th at 6 p.m. So July 8th, we end at 1 p.m. Regarding the modalities for the urgent debate, allow me to recall that urgent debates follow the same modalities as general debates. I would also like to recall that the time-saving modalities that have been applied by the Council since its 59th session, establishing speaking time limits for general debates at 1 minute 30 seconds for all speakers. I therefore propose that the same modalities be applied for this urgent debate, with the speaking time limit to 1 minute and 30 seconds for all and 5 minutes allocated for the concerned country. Now, before giving the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom to present their request to the Council for the holding of this urgent debate, as well as any additional information in this regard, I would like to remind you that this is a decision-making process and that therefore only members of the Council may take the floor at this stage. I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the United Kingdom.
President, the situation in El Obeid, North Kordofan, is of the gravest concern. Intensifying drone strikes have devastated civilian infrastructure, causing acute shortages of fuel and water and claiming civilian lives. Siege-like conditions have left thousands trapped, cut off from basic services and humanitarian assistance. Up to 500,000 civilians are now at risk of large-scale atrocities. As High Commissioner Turk has said, we cannot allow a repeat of preventable atrocities. Mr. President, we often speak about the need for preventative action in the face of escalating risk of serious human rights violations and abuses. This Council must act with urgency to help prevent further harm to civilians. It is for this reason that the UK, on behalf of the core group on Sudan, requests an urgent debate at the 62nd session of the Human Rights Council on the situation in and around El Obeid. There must be an immediate de-escalation of violence, and all parties must comply fully with their obligations under international humanitarian law and international human rights law. We urge all Council members to support this request. The core group also intends to table a draft resolution for the Council's consideration, which will be shared with colleagues shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I now give the floor to members of the council who wish to make general comments on this proposal. I see no request for the floor. May I take it that the council decides to hold the urgent debate to address the human rights situation in and around El Obeid, North Kordofan, in the context okay. To address the human rights situation in and around El Obeid, North Kordofan, in the context of the ongoing conflict in the Sudan on Friday, July 3rd at 10 a.m. under the proposed modalities. As I was saying this, the Secretariat reminded me that I should say also that it is my understanding that the delegation of the Sudan does not wish to take the floor at this stage. So the council, I take it that it decides to undertake the urgent debate on July 3rd at 10 a.m. under the proposed modalities. I see no objection. It is so decided. So, Excellencies, distinguished representative, colleagues, this brings us to the end of this meeting. The Council will reconvene tomorrow at 10 a.m. to continue with the consideration and adoption of the outcome documents of the other states examined during the 51st session of the UPR Working Group. And I now hereby declare the 24th meeting of the 62nd session of the Human Rights Council closed. Thank you.
you.